Hi everyone, my name is Vaike and I'm going to speak to you about how we set up the urban living labs in the Green Log project. I am a professor of design ethnography at Halmstad University in Sweden, and we are working in our research programs here in Halmstad around these issues about best practices, procedures of creating and enable urban living labs and different kind of procedures to make them tick. This first slide shows the first activity we put together and tailored for the Green Log Living Labs. So we realized that we needed to start with scoping procedures. And this particular canvas was all about helping the Living Lab consortiums to aligning their goals and visions for the Urban Living Lab. This is really, really important before you start to think about technologies and implementations and, of course, user requirements. Because if you don't have aligned goals and visions in the Living Lab, it's really hard to get down to concrete activities that you want to do. So the first questions we asked the different consortiums was what do you want to achieve with your Living Lab? Who and what will benefit from it? And what are the primary challenges for the Living Lab? And of course, a really important question to discuss with different stakeholders is the question of what is crucial for your Living Lab to succeed. And in urban living labs, when you might have partners and stakeholders from both private and public sector, and also maybe communities and different NGOs and organizations, this is a crucial question to discuss and to see and acknowledge each other's different ideas of what counts as a success. This slide was another activity where we tailored the consortiums into discussing who are the stakeholders in the Living Lab. Because we had, of course, a list of partners that had signed up for the project, but on the other hand, there could be other stakeholders also who should also be invited. And in the Green Log project, we also developed this idea of 4 different clusters of stakeholders, which are all needed in an urban living lab. The policymakers, the city logistic operations, the tech partners, and of course the local drivers, the end users, all the people in the communities. In this particular living lab that filled in this canvas, they had different stakeholders in all the different clusters. That might not be the case in all the living labs, and this particular canvas really made that obvious in that case. So in the next step, we helped the consortiums to think about who are the core stakeholder group in the Living Lab. This is really important when you set up the organizations. Who are the ones who are actually the drivers of the Living Lab, which is sort of the core of the organization? In the next level, who are the ones who should be engaged? Who are stakeholders who might not be in the very core, but who are very interested in have a stake in the Living Lab? And of course, then who are the ones who should be informed? They might not be in the engaged group of stakeholders, but are really important to keep informed. So what we did was just to help them move all the stakeholders that had identified in the previous task to put them into this organizational chart to see, to develop their organization. In the next step, in the next activity, we saw that there was a need for the consortium to come together and again and actually decide on where the context would be for the Living Lab. What actual site would be the best? And since they had done all the other previous activities where they have pinpointed success factors and barriers and challenges, that really helped them to find out the best place, the best site for the Living Lab implementations. And when that was done, we asked them to start to write up user stories. Who are the actual users of the technology being implemented? In this particular case, which is the Oxfordshire Living Lab in Greenlog project, they start to think about, okay, we have logistic providers with different kind of cargo bikes, but they had also shopkeepers in a particular covered market who were also kind of users, and of course the people who were shopping in the market but also using the cargo bike delivery services. So we asked them to write up, create those user stories based on particular people who might be affected by the project and what their particular needs would be. In the next stage then, they developed these user stories into more concrete user journeys. And to write up these kind of personas was very, very helpful in identifying who the users are, what kind of people are in the different user groups, how they use technology today already, their capabilities, competencies, their attitudes, all these different things, which is really, really a good way to move forward towards user requirements for the particular services. After the first set of iterations with different user groups, and also a first prototyping session with the technology partners, we asked the Living Labs to come back to us and do another set of activities. And just to pull together everything they learned from starting to prototype with the users they had identified, to think about what do we know about the needs, desires, the barriers, constraints of the users and the context in these particular use cases. So the consortium sat together again and started to think about, okay, what have we learned through this first iteration? And what is critical for the implementation of the use case to be successful from those perspectives? Now, this is a very good activity and exercise that really pulls closer and closer to the important perspectives to have in mind when the technology then is going to be developed. And even more important, after that first iteration with the very lo-fi prototypes in these areas, we asked the consortiums to think about what are the unknowns now? What don't we know about the user? And of course, how can we find out those things? A very important factor in setting up urban living labs is to get close to the communities, get close to the context, and really think through what we know, what we don't know, and what kind of activities could we put together just to get those more concrete ideas about what people actually value, what they need, and what they are ready to use in the context. For example, here's an interesting comment from one of the consortium's stakeholders. Do they see an e-commerce platform as a threat or a benefit? which was a really, really important thing to come closer to. So our suggestions were there just to get close to that question by actually starting to talk to people and ask them and see what they thought about it. So this was just a very brief overview of the first steps you can take as a best practice for creating an aligned and engaged urban living lab consortium. Stakeholder engagement is always crucial, but sometimes really hard to get to. But these kind of activities, it's really good to concentrate on that in the beginning, even though you're very, very interested in jumping into understanding user requirements. It's always very good to start with getting the stakeholders to know each other and create an engaged urban living lab before you approach those kind of questions. Thank you very much.